post-war generations failed to restore the country. However, the recovery process of the powerful country had already begun. Paraguay is quickly migrating to quality. There are more people who pay taxes, who requires everything to be well done, who is interested in security, and there's less corruption too. No doubt there is so much to do, but Paraguay is not the one of the 80s anymore, where everything was to be done. Some people say it cannot take us too long to recover from a war, but they do not know that only to recover the original population we lost in the war took almost 100 years for us, and the estimated population by 2050 will be just about 10 million. I think Paraguay lost its independence in 1870 and is recovered now. The invading army after a decade of the occupation just left debts, lies, and devastation. The design of the powerful country was truncated, was totally interrupted, but Paraguay is still alive. We should have this at this moment, much more people, organization, infrastructure. Actually, Paraguay has been put in pause because the objective of destroying it was not achieved, at least not completely. You know what? Brazil announced 4 weeks ago the purchase of a nuclear submarine. The installation of a base of a Brazilian base in the Antarctica, unmanned planes to fly over the borders and surveillance satellites. What their government is actually doing is trying to protect, enhance, and nurture the self-esteem of its citizens. By the way, did you remember any single image of dead bodies among the ruins of the Twin Towers after September 11 attack? Why do you did it? Why? In Paraguay, however, for over 100 years and even more, we're trying to saying things that affected our perception of what we really are. No one ever cared about healing our nation's moral through the recovering of our true identity, which is not merely the particular language, the music. Identity is what you believe about you. Those things that you can do and those things that you can't do. That's your identity, together with the rest, of course. Paraguayans would not find reasons to be proud in the number of hospitals we have, in the quality of the streets, in the commitment of and patriotism of many or some of our politicians, and especially in the countries in infrastructure. But they can find hundreds of different reasons in another areas, which are probably much more important. Actually, if we had received a fair price for the energy generated in just one of the dams we have over Paraná River, this is about $150 per each gigawatt generated, which is the market value of it. From the beginning of the generation of electricity in 1984, instead of the 2.4 that we've been receiving for 26 years, or even the $8 we're receiving now after much lobbying, the present state of Paraguay would be so different. But you do have one idea how big is $132 billion? This is the amount of money we're talking about. Let me tell you that such amount of money is enough to construct 13,000 hospitals of $10 million each. Are you Paraguayans sad about living in a Mediterranean country? Don't. I do not personally change 10 kilometers of Paraná River for 1,000 or even 10,000 coastal zones on any of the ocean of this planet. The only way to take away everything that is preventing us from becoming what we're supposed to become is by seeking the truth, by proceeding scientifically. We have to do some sort of a global analysis to discover what is the position of Paraguay in the world. And we need to have the big picture in mind, and then to take a conclusion. Most of the negative things about Paraguay we can see or read in the newspapers are only partial views of the biggest scenario. We have to be careful in gathering data from reliable sources with no partial views, by first drawing an hypothesis that contains everything what people believed about Paraguay in order to confirm it or even to destroy it. Always with the truth. All data should aim to shed light on the hypothesis, right? So if it is correct, terrific. If it is not, wrong. Okay, useful. As we discover the truth, so that we can speak and talk with propriety and validity. Okay, the hypothesis is basically a compendium of what we have been hearing about Paraguay for years. And now maybe it's time to confirm the veracity of the statements summarized on this hypothesis. Perhaps at some other time it was true, much of what we being listening, or much what is written in this hypothesis, but few have noticed that Paraguay is not the same. Here is the scenario. This is the hypothesis I wrote so that you can understand what is the purpose of this. The real purpose of this is to write something, to say something, give a statement. This is proceeding scientifically. That is called a hypothesis. And that statement, that phrase, must be confirmed, must be tested. So, this is the hypothesis. I'm going to read it for you. Paraguay is a small country in the heart of South America. Typical, right? Very poor and insecure. The figures indicate that the degree of its development, population welfare, health, economy, and education are the lowest in South America. Only comparable with those of Haiti in Central America and many African countries. Even Bolivia shows better development indicators than Paraguay. You cannot say I'm crazy saying this, because I've been listening to this for years. So, what is your first impression about this? Try to keep the hypothesis in mind so that at the time you're listening the data I will present to you, you can say, okay, this is true, this is related to the hypothesis, this is not. The idea of gathering data for, say, destroying or confirming this hypothesis is so clear. We need to know the truth. Okay? So, let's talk about the indicators I choose for trying to put some light on this hypothesis. I choose 8 indicators. And they will help us to determine the veracity of this hypothesis. The first 5 indicators have been taken for being the most representative, the most important, the most revealing, to settle on the real situation in terms of welfare of the citizens of one specific country. While the last 3 indicators are related to sustainable development. There is no concept of development now in 21st century without the concept of sustainability. And sustainability is basically thinking about the environment, thinking about the future, not destroying all the resources by the development. Okay, so that's basically sustainability. And so this is the number of indicators. Could be less, could be more, but I choose 8, okay, because I consider the most important. Okay, so I personally do not believe in the statistics that estimate poverty by the way people cook, the type of the floor they have in the house, the availability of a bathroom inside the house, or even the amount of money, which is the typical consideration those experts in development used to do. Okay, instead we have to measure welfare by they do this too. It's not necessarily what they do all the time. We have to measure welfare and wealth using health indicators in the first place, access to education, of course, along with the ability, and this is very important, along with the ability to produce food and energy without destroying the environment or dramatically reduce it by destroying the natural resources. Let me give you just an example. Who is wealthier for you? An average typical Russian or an average typical Paraguayan? Well, let me tell you that for me, right, is Paraguayans are much wealthier. I'll tell you why. Because we just live longer. How much? Well, the life expectancy in Paraguay is 76.7 years, while in Russia is 66. It's 10 years less. So apparently the conquest of the space underground, decorated with icons and valuable pieces of art, nuclear submarines and thousands of nuclear weapons, appears not to be an important factor for the quality of life of the citizens of our country. That's my opinion. So the indicators I choose are life expectancy at birth in the first place. That's indicator number 1. Indicator number 2, economic growth. Indicator number 3, infant mortality before 1 year. Indicator 4 is literacy rate. Indicator 5 is murders per year per 100,000 inhabitants. Indicator number 6 is food production progress over the past 10 years. Indicator 7 is renewable energy production per capita. And the last indicator is amount of carbon dioxide released per capita. I will explain to you one by one why did I choose this and why, what is, not why necessarily, but what is the result of these findings.